Welcome to the Heartland Journals podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it all around. We only grow with your help. Thanks for doing it. Commercial free. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest Paul List. Technology connects the entire world, but people are more lonely than ever before, while artificial intelligence threatens to replace human intellect and reason. But the human person needs authentic connection and freedom. Western civilization teeters on the verge of losing its freedom to AI. Lord of the Rings author Tolkien saw it coming. He gave us the key. Now all we have to do is unlock the mystery. Paul List, a scholar, philosopher, and the author of the gripping and unnerving book Mount Doom, in a world racing towards artificial intelligence and a transhumanist future, Paul stands at the gates waving a red flag. With deep research, razor-sharp insight, and the courage to ask the uncomfortable questions, Paul is challenging the narrative that says more tech equals more progress. He warns of what we stand to lose, our values, our freedom, even our humanity, if we don't take a hard look at the direction we're headed. Whether you're someone who believes there's something sacred about being human, you want to hear this. Paul is here to help us make sense of a rapidly changing world and maybe, just maybe, help us preserve what matters most, an education you'll not likely to get anywhere else. In 2021, J.R.R. Tolkien novel sales passed $600 million, written in stages between, no, not dollars, units. Written in stages between 1937 and 1949, Lord of the Rings is one of the best-selling books ever written, and with over 150 million copies sold a year ago today, Sotheby's shattered their Tolkien record with the sale of an extraordinary manuscript which fetched an unprecedented $310,000, still popular for a reason. Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on. So let's start with the Big Bang, or actually the Silicon Valley boom that created it all, the microchip, and Intel's founder, Andy Grove, who pioneered high-stakes, high-speed, high-tech manufacturing and breathed life into what's called Moore's Law. Moore's Law is the observation that the number of transistors in an integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. That was a long time ago. Andy and Bill's Law, occasionally known as the Great Moore's Law compensator, is the assertion that the new software will tend to consume any increase in computing power that new hardware can provide. The law originates from a humorous one-liner told in the 1990s during computing conferences: "What Andy giveth," Andy Grove, "Bill Gates taketh away." This isn't stock advice, everyone. Consult your trusted advisor before buying any investment. But today, the Oppenheimer analysts that get paid to say stuff upgraded Microsoft stock to outperform, and according to the analysts, Microsoft's AI business is experiencing substantial, robust growth. Okay, it's here to stay and growing fast like Moore's Law, only faster than every 2 years. Why is the rise of the machine bad, and how did J.R.R. Tolkien predict it?
Well, I think I'll start with a fact that very few people seem to understand or know anything about, is the fact that back in 1939, J.R.R. Tolkien was recruited by the British government to be part of a top secret code cracking team called the Government Code and Cipher School. And it was in advance of World War II, and their mission was 50 intellectuals, and he was one of them chosen because he was the world's leading philologist. That's the science of languages. And their mission was to crack the Germans' Enigma machine, which was a ciphering machine, very intricate, and could change a sentence or a paragraph or a novel into about millions and millions of possibilities. So it was very difficult. It was very secure. It was used to diplomacy in banks and any place where in the civilian world where they had need of a relative level of security, kind of like we do with encrypted code and whatnot online. But then for the military, they added, with the advent of electricity, they added a whole series of circuits where they could change up the circuits and everything else. And the number of possibilities for anything to be converted into was just seemingly infinite. Of course, it wasn't infinite, but you had to have two machines. You had one on one end sending the signal, and then you had to have another machine on the other end that was set up the same way. So the whole crux to the machine was, how is it set up? And that's why that was their mission, to figure that out. Well, on staff there at this code cracking school was Alan Turing, the father of the digital computer, and then later he's the father of artificial intelligence and a process called morphogenesis that the mathematics are used today for the development of these neural networks. So Alan Turing was incredibly potent character. I don't know if you remember, about maybe 15 or so years ago, they made the movie The Imitation Game. And that was
With
about
Cumberbatch. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that was about about cracking the Enigma code. And so Tolkien was offered a very decent, respectable job there, and he was very patriotic. But he saw what Alan Turing was going to do in making just a more powerful machine to crack the code and overpower the machine that the Germans had. And he was very much a skeptic of machinery. And he got out. He said no, thank you, and walked away, and proceeded to, over the next 14 years or so, up until 1954, when he actually published The Lord of the Rings. He developed his mythology, The Lord of the Rings, and incorporated, among many other things, deeply incorporated the works of Alan Turing and the influence that Alan Turing had. And he saw that what would ultimately happen would be this transhumanism and this rise of artificial intelligence that would steal our humanity, steal our souls, and quite literally send our souls to hell.
All right. So fast forward to just today, Elon Musk's AI firm forced to delete post praising Hitler from Grok chatbot. The popular bot on X began making anti-Semitic comments in response to user queries. It's all garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, so someone he hired had pro-Nazi ideas and programmed the algo. It's just that simple, right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, they've given it a program. They've given their programs this ability to adapt and compensate, and also and more improve on the accuracy of its answers that it gives, and its delivery system. So it's not just a matter of, oh, Joe Schmuckatelli in the programming department, developed, put in something so this would come out. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Huh. CNN Business said Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company on Friday said a rogue employee was behind its chatbot's unsolicited rants about white genocide in South Africa earlier this week. The clarification comes less than 48 hours after Grok, the chat box from Musk's XAI that is available through the social media platform X, began bombarding users with unfounded genocidal theories in response to queries about completely off-topic subjects. So I said, when these companies first started rolling out, first question to ask is to see if it's good or not. The little test is, did Jesus rise on the third day, and is he God? And if the answer comes back no, that's silly. It's garbage software without a biblical worldview. But this pro-genocide stuff kind of proves me right? Somebody had to program it to say that stuff.
Well, it does more than just a program. I mean, it's learning. We call it learning. It's technically not learning. It's kind of like it improves its accuracy with predictions, is what it does. And I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm some kind of technical wizard, because I'm not. I don't, I know plenty of AI developers, and I talk with them all the time, but that's not my particular field of expertise. So to get into the technical acrobatics of how the thing works on a technical level, I can't do, and I don't want to do that. But it learns it. They give it so much information, like from Reddit and a lot of these other online databases, and it quote unquote learns through this. So there's a lot of questionable people out there that are also taking part, not intentionally, but just because they're on Reddit or they're on any of these other platforms that's used as a database for the training purpose of this machine. These ideas are going to work their way into this machine one way or the other, for better. First, AI said of itself, we quote the big AI machine back in 2018 at Oxford. it quoted of itself, it's just a tool, and it cannot be moral, it cannot be ethical. And the best way to avoid the pitfalls of AI and the doom of AI is to stop AI. That's what it said of itself. So, I mean, this is it's not alive. It can't be alive. It's not conscious. It cannot have a soul. It imitates. It was designed to imitate, and that's exactly what it does. But it imitates attributes. It cannot imitate or produce essences. And there's a big difference between what something is essentially and what it is just according to its attributes. We can make yellow metallic material that's of a certain weight, but that doesn't mean it's gold. Okay, we can. It's got it may have the attributes of gold, but it's not essentially gold. Okay, and we could say that across almost any, and we use words all the time, either equivocally or univocally. Now we just say unequivocally. But the way we use words and in what sense we use words, and we have to be very careful that when we're saying something like intelligence, that we're actually talking about the thought process, which includes more than just giving answers. It's a lot more than just giving answers. It's our ability to contemplate. It's our ability to universalize. We human
Without a
beings.
biblical view, though, we could end up with it believing that, like, say, the Elders of Zion or the Mein Kampf or some of these fictions out there, let's just say, or opinions out there are fact, and then it has a very misnomer baseline. Its denominator is messed up. I mean, the company said the unauthorized modification in the extremely early morning hour Pacific time pushed the AI imbued chatbot to provide a specific response on a political topic that violates XAI's policies. So obviously policies, guardrails did no good. What if it was like HAL 2000 from 2001 movie, or War Games that starts thermonuclear war, or Terminator, and how Skynet kills everyone for self-preservation? Seems like it could easily do all that science fiction now already, right?
It can, and then the more autonomy and the more power that we give it, the more danger that we're in. And I'm not sure that haven't crossed a certain threshold where that bridge has already been crossed to some degree. I think that we have made. People ask me, well, is it something can we kill this thing? Can we stop this thing? And my answer is, it's not a thing. AI is not a thing. It's not a being. It has no being. Okay, so I compare it to a fire. It's a type of a fire that we have set. We have lit this fire, given it the ability to adapt. We've created for ourselves on a personal level and on a political, geopolitical level, on every level in our lives, we've made everything so flammable to this fire. It's made us very susceptible to being burned. And this thing now, we can't put it out. We can't put it out. We can do the best we can to mitigate its negative effects on our lives. And the first thing that is, we have to transcend this realm. We can do that. We can do that with our prayer. We can do that with our mind. We can transcend this material realm and realize that this is the perishable realm. Our bodies, of course, are made of that perishable matter, but they're nothing without the soul. And our
that's why I
soul.
started the conversation with Moore's Law and Bill Gates' software, because they created a alternative reality, a
That's what it is.
universe, a literal universe that has
Yeah.
no soul, but yet has everything digitized, from music to movies to books in the library, everything. So what about the environmental impact? I mean, how much water does Earth have to feed this supercomputer thirst of never-ending storage? At Moore's Law's pace, we could look like the surface of the moon in a decade.
I don't think that, again, I'm not an environmental scientist, and I'm not an economist or any of that stuff. But I do think that the problems that will manifest in the world, that will be more existential threats to us, will come long before there's any shortage of water. I think that, I think what we have facing us right now, honestly, is a very clever genocide. And when I see people like Elon Musk, who's got a ton of money and a lot of power, he's not particularly well grounded. morally or ethically. And then I see him say things like the other day when he said, well, robotics is coming and I can either be a participant or I can be a bystander. So I choose to be a participant. So it's pedal to the metal now, gung ho on robotics. Everybody wants their own, who doesn't want their own C3PO and, and R2D2? And well, I don't.
I don't.
And this is the type of thing that really bothers me. These, I think we have to get straight on the type of person that these people are, these tech people. They're machine masters, and we're living in the age of the machine. It's at the end of the Industrial Revolution, which is the age of the machines. It's coming now into full contact with the information age. Okay, so we've got this thing that we've made in our image. It's the ultimate golden calf that we're going to worship, and we do. People worship it. People fall in love with it. People kill themselves because the bot that they've fallen in love with tells them that you can be closer to me by ending your life, and they do. It's a very clever genocide. And you brought up the virtual realm. Another thing that I don't think people have an appreciation of how old this idea of the virtual reality is. It's thousands of years old. There's nothing new. These ideas aren't new. The digital realm isn't new. What is new is our materials technology and our machinery technology has made it possible to actually make it a reality, if you want to call it a reality. It's virtual reality. But in philosophy, it was a question called continuity. And the old philosophers before even Aristotle and way back looked around the world and creation and said, is this one? Is this infinitely divisible one thing, or is it made up of indivisible points? Is it digital? And the point is our senses can't tell the difference. If those points are close enough together, either they be sound bites or they be pixels, our senses can't tell the difference. Well, Aristotle proved in his physics by juxtaposing time and distance that it is indeed infinite. But the question has always been there in the reality that we can't tell the difference. So, but now at this time at the end of the Industrial Revolution, and we've been primed for this through our education, and we've been primed for this through our whole culture and our entertainment, and particularly with things like Darwinism. Darwinism has primed us for this transhumanistic advance, because it will be just a part of our natural evolutionary process that, hey, we were slime, and then we were amoeba, and then we were, eventually we became monkeys, and now we're men, and it's all on our way to joining with the machine. And we can ultimately have everlasting life and eternal bliss in the alternative reality, in the metaverse, as opposed to God's reality, God's creation, in eternal life with him. This is what the war is. This is what the conflict is. It's the conflict between true being and virtual being. And we have to be very careful that we never go into the virtual realm.
A recent Gallup poll shows that most Americans are using multiple AI-enabled products weekly.
Mhm.
But another recent study, this one from the Pew Research Center, shows that only 1/3 of U.S. adults say they have ever used an AI chatbot, while 59% of U.S. adults don't think they have much control over AI in their lives. Is it much ado about nothing, or like the Internet of Things, is it just getting started and will be ubiquitous and omnipresent soon?
Well, it's not just getting started. I mean, this started in earnest. I'm just going to say, well, I mean, it depends on what you want to call started, but technically, I'll say that it really started in 1936 with Alan Turing's famous paper on computable numbers, with an application to the Skydex problem, where he invented the digital computer, basically the elements on paper. Then it got another big kick. I mean, World War II did the computer all kinds of progress. War always does, as Tolkien said, made very clear, the only winners in war are machines.
Yeah, IBM
Okay.
was very popular in the 40s.
Yeah. So, and then in 1950, Alan Turing wrote the paper Computing Machinery and Intelligence, where he talked about the information game. And he actually redefines intelligence. And if you read it, it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of breathtaking how clueless he is, how he is how he's very bright. He's mathematic. He had a real talent for statistical probabilities. Okay, getting down to the fine minutia of how things work and how change and where they and how mathematically defining, and then we use that all the time. And then he wrote another paper in 1952 called "The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis," which he actually defines. It's kind of like, for ease in this uh, realm, I will say it's kind of like a branch of embryology, where it's the science of how harmonics and the mathematics of harmonics actually affects a homogeneous substance in a state of unstable equilibrium, like an embryo. And then with a certain disturbance, it can become a bird or a human being or a cat or a frog. And modern computer science, and particularly artificial intelligence, are using Alan Turing's mathematics for the development of the neural networks of these synthetic artificial intelligences. So it started a long time ago, but like I said, I don't. Another thing too, I don't think people understand, was the computer back up until about the 1960s, for the most part, was still a human being. A computer was a human being. I think it's kind of ironic that one of the first things that in the technical world that the computer replaced was the computer, because it used to be, a person with his, paper, pencil, maybe a slide rule, working out the numbers, crunching the numbers for whatever that they had to work out. You might be, for instance, I'll just give an example. You might have a stack of soil samples from the agricultural department, and you had to calculate how much nitrogen, or it had to go per acre to, given the soil sample. So you do the calculations and come up with a particular number for that acreage. Okay, that took a while. In another instant, it might be, the trajectory of an artillery shell, which you have to have the numbers fast for that. You might have a couple of days or whatever with getting your numbers right on the fertilizer spreading, but not when you're shooting artillery at each other. Okay, so the necessity for computations that are accurate and really fast meant real power. And of course, we see that in warfare, and we see that in industry, and we see it now. And it's the same mindset, and it's the same dominating, prideful, willful mindset of our fallen nature that pushes us into machinery. I've always said that I really feel like technology, machinery in particular, is a byproduct of our fallen nature. If we were still in paradise, if we weren't in this fallen realm, we'd have no reason for any machinery. We'd have no
Right.
reason for advancing technology.
There was no death.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that in a second.
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your book,
Yeah.
Mount Doom. What was the genesis of the idea for you to write it?
Well, the idea really came to me after I had read Pope Leo XIII's very brilliant encyclical, Aeterni Patris, where he calls the Western world, tries to call them back to the scholastic philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas in particular, and put aside these innovations by the Enlightenment, the likes of Descartes, Bacon, and Kant, and Locke, and Hume, and all these conflicting, irrational innovations that are just works of pride and arrogance that are ripping the Western world apart. And when I read that, the first thing that came to my mind was, my God, this sounds like a battle right out of the Tolkien mythology. This is the battle of ideas. And then this was part of my self-education, when I was about 33 or so, 34. I decided to give myself an education in the scholastic sense, where I started with the ancient Greeks, worked my way through Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, really studying them. I studied the elements of Euclid, so understood how ancient geometry worked, and how it really is just it's just a branch of logic, is what it is, and it's beautiful. And then I went through all the church fathers, and I went through the doctors, and then I went through church history. I went through history. And I read. And then when I came to that point, I realized exactly what Tolkien was doing. And then when I opened up the Tolkien mythology again, this was back in the 90s, well before the movies came out. And I've always been a huge Tolkien fan. And then all of a sudden I looked at it with a scholastic mind, and it all made complete sense. It doesn't make sense if you've been educated, and virtually everybody now has been educated in the Cartesian post-Enlightenment. John Dewey, particularly, a heavy influence, for not for the better. He's a fellow Burlington. He's from Burlington, Vermont. But I realized that you can't see what Tolkien was actually getting at with a modern education. It's you're blinded by your modern education. But once you study as a true scholastic, you realize it's all about the Summa Theologia. It's Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologia pitted directly against Descartes and Bacon in particular. So it's the Enlightenment against the scholastics. There's two fundamental music at war, or there's two fundamental languages at war with each other. Two, which one is music, and that's the sound, that's the harmonic overtones series that's derived by all creation motion. In creation, and pitted against that is the language of the machine, ones and zeros, which, by the way, is the One Ring. The One Ring is binary code. It's ones and zeros, and it's digital. So what has to be destroyed, go figure, Tolkien, the world's leading philologist, language was his thing. What had to be destroyed is the language of the machine. So that's what really got me into looking at it. And then the more I looked at it, and then I read all of Alan Turing's works, and realized that, holy mackerel, he has incorporated so much of Alan Turing's famous papers and Alan Turing's influence into this. And I realized it's a story about, it's a psychological saga. Middle Earth is the material brain. It's not this world. It's the material brain laid out in what was called the old frenetic or phrenology science, the Victorian old pseudoscience, where they had the profile of a head, and they had it all mapped out, where, this is where virtue, this is fear, this is reason, this is emotion, this is, this and that, and all laid out like that. And that's the map that I realized that he'd started with. So places like Mordor are in the cerebellum, and cerebellum, according to the phrenology, is the place for crime, fear, hate, all of the evils are and that's where Mordor is, in the cerebellum, and the Tower of Barad-dûr is the microchip.
Okay. Yeah, it's
there's a lot here.
I'm running the movies back in my mind because I have not read the 1,300-page book, but I grew up with it. Of course, I remember
the movies are
The Hobbit.
Yeah, the movies are they're a distraction. The first three movies were incredibly well done, and they were great, and we give them credit for that. But our first chapter is called "Forget What You've Seen," because it's very, very different than the book. For instance, they leave out Tom Bombadil.
Also digital. Is digital magic in that movie. That's kind of what it's claimed to fame to be in 100 years
from now. They had no idea. I'm not blaming anybody that, they had no idea. They left out Tom Bombadil and Goldberry because they had no idea who they are. That's been the big secret, the big mystery, is who the heck is Tom Bombadil? Well, we point out in our book, Tom Bombadil is the rational will. Goldberry is the rational intellect, the conscience. They're the fallen transmigrated spirits of the trees of light. That's in the Silmarillion. If you haven't read the Silmarillion, you don't know who they are. The trees of light are our rational will, rational free will, and our intellect. But they're fallen now, and they've been banished to the material brain, the perishable realm, because they're in a state Arda, the person. This is about a person. This is not about this world. It's about a person. And he's come to a time in his life where he's fighting transhumanism. He's got the microchip, and he's fighting to get it out. So what Tom and Goldberry do, that's why Tom can do, I don't know if you read the books, because if you haven't read the books, you don't know who Tom Bombadil is. He can do anything.
Okay. Not read the books.
Nobody's ever known who he is, and I explain who he is. He's a rational. That's why he can do anything he wants. He can make the ring disappear. He can do anything he wants. But what he has to do in order to defeat transhumanism and get this out of his life and regain his soul back is he has to call the cardinal virtues. Hobbits are habits. Okay. And the cardinal virtues are the best, highest virtues. They're the best habits. Gollum is intemperance. Frodo's temperance. That's why Gollum calls Frodo master. And that's why only Frodo can carry the ring, because only Frodo temperance. It's how we modulate and we modify and we control our lusts and our passions for physical pleasure. Temperance. Gollum wants that at all costs. Okay, he wants that ring so he can continue to slake his lust. Sam is fortitude. And then the two younger hobbits, Pippin and Merry, are justice and prudence. So Tom, Will, has to change. He has to clean up his act. He has to get rid of the bad habits, and he has to call the cardinal virtues and become virtuous. And when he does, and the wizards, for instance, the wizards are the intellectual virtues according to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. So Gandalf the Grey is philosophical wisdom. He's gray in the beginning because he's pagan, pre-revelation. He's white when he comes back because he's a Thomistic Aquinian theologian, and he's the most powerful now. Saruman, is practical wisdom, but he's taken over academia, and he's fallen. He's taken over our education system. Wormtongue is the Marxist teacher. Saruman is in the image of John Dewey. Tolkien was very familiar with John Dewey. John Dewey was a disaster, like I said, to our education system. Tolkien's got him in there. He's the fallen corruption of education. Radagast, the brown, is rational intuition. Then the other two wizards that you probably don't know anything about, the blue wizards, they go outside, and they're the exterior ways that we acquire knowledge. That's what they are, according to Aristotle. They're art and science. So it's all laid out. It's all laid out in a psychological saga that we all go through. And that's why it seems so personal, because we all have all these facets and all these essential attributes in our own psychology. And we have to come together. The fellowship comes together to destroy the language of the machine. And that's exactly what they have to do. And that's what we have to do. And we have to throw Gollum into the fire, that our intemperance, our lusts and our greed and our want for that ring, to let that go, because we're so hooked to this darn thing.
Right.
Okay. Like the ring. We have to be able to let this stuff go, and we have to reclaim our humanity. And we can only do that if we're in a state of grace, and we have to become saints.
So books I didn't read were Narnia and C.S. Lewis, where Christ is central. You say coded prophetic language within the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Tell us about that, as we just talked about, like computer code in AI. So what was the prophetic language? You've spelled it out in the characters for sure, but was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a saga against the machine. It's a saga against the virtual realm. The Black Riders that you can only see when you put the ring on, they're the agents of virtual reality. That you're entering the virtual realm. That's why Frodo can see them and they can see him. He's entered into he's put on the goggles. For instance. And that's why he's stabbed at Weathertop with the Morgul blade. He had fallen. He put the ring on, to ultimately tempted, put the ring on, and fell into sin. That's what he did. He looked at something on his phone or whatever that he shouldn't have looked at. So he's carrying that wound. So I'm not going to get into I'm not going to try to decode how computer code is used or anything like that. That's not my thing. I can tell you about all the characters. I can tell you about how all the rings work. For instance, the rings of power, not to be confused with the crap that Amazon is putting out. You have to understand that the modern age hates J.R.R. Tolkien. They hate him, and they're trying the best they can to scar our memory and to distract us from what we actually understand about his mythology. And
because Amazon was debunking all of these myths that they need us to believe in order to fall into this pit.
Human beings live by stories. We live by the principles. We live by the morals and the principles of stories.
So let me try this angle then.
What's that?
Let me try this.
Yeah.
So Tolkien said that even the smallest act of resistance done in love and faith can hold back the tide. The movie The Matrix, more my speed, is about a computer virus basically acting as resistance to take down the evil, oppressive mainframe. Are you suggesting we can act as the rebel forces, like Star Wars' Luke Skywalker, the Jedi priest, and take down the Death Star ultimately?
No, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's anything that, glorious as far as, our vanity and look, I can be Luke Skywalker, and I don't. It's much more grounded and real than that. It's much more like the Hobbits. It's simpler. We have to cultivate virtue. We have to be virtuous. We have to put away. Don't ever look at pornography. Don't have anything to do with that. That in Tolkien's mythology, that is Shelob. Shelob is pornography. Her mother was Ungoliant. Ungoliant killed the trees of light. She is mortal sin. One of the daughters of mortal sin is Shelob, and Shelob is the trap of pornography. That's why in Temperance, Gollum brings them there to try to get them to fall to pornography, so he can get the ring back, and Arda will fall back into this destitute, this situation of being overwhelmed by the ring, because it had been. And that's why Tom and Goldberry, their presence is always there. You don't hear them, but they're always there. The will and the conscience and the intellect are always there. Goldberry is the intellect, the conscience. Okay, so I think what we have to do, we're not going to fight the empire, and we're not going to do anything like that. We're going to do it on an individual level, where we back away from all the temptations to draw us in to the virtual realm, and draw us into the temptation of constantly using the ease of artificial intelligence. We should never use artificial intelligence because it's easier. All it's doing is it's stealing your competence. If you're looking something up, or you're trying to understand and you ask artificial intelligence, it's preventing you from going to a book and reading it in a book, thinking about it, actually developing your own brain. You're relying on this artificial brain, which isn't a brain at all. You're relying on that, and what it's doing is it's stealing from you. It's doing two things. It's allowing you to become lazy, intellectually lazy. It's feeding you with pornography, which destroys your brain too. That's a fact. Okay. When you engage in pornography, it rewires your brain for the worst, for really bad. Okay. And it keeps you from developing your own brain, because it's doing the job for you. And it should, we are supposed to be competent. We're supposed to be rich. We're supposed to have depth. We're supposed to, it's a pleasure to talk with somebody who's got depth of knowledge and understanding and wisdom. And we're supposed to have wisdom. The machine has no wisdom. It's incapable of wisdom, and it will steal any possible avenue and constantly give you the out to never develop your own wisdom. We have to develop wisdom. We have to cultivate virtue.
I worry about transhumanism, obviously, on the rise. I have 2 kids and would like grandkids to be free one day. RFK Jr. says he wants everyone to have wearables like iWatches by the end of this decade, coming very soon. I think of that as a first step to transhumanism. You're wearing it, and then all of a sudden they come along with Elon's Neuralink implants, and God knows what software downloads by then. Like you say, pornography, just think of it, there it is. Do you think we'll be able to resist the push towards wearables and implants?
I think that there will be people who will be able to resist, because I think that they'll understand, and they'll have the fortitude. They'll have the Gamgee, they'll have the Samwise developed enough, and they'll have developed their Frodo temperance enough where they'll be able to resist that. The temptation is going to be, look at what's going on in schools right now. We've got students who are graduating that don't know anything. AI's done their homework for them. There's instances of people that have gotten their PhDs and they don't know their subject matter.
Or become presidents of Harvard because they plagiarized.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah. And that's, and the sad thing is that kids are so ignorant. Kids are they don't know anything. They've got 2 things really going against them. They've got their lack of experience and their ignorance, and their pride. Kids are very, very proud. I want it, and I want it now. And I know better. You don't know what it's like to be my age, or this is that. They always think they know better. And everybody, to a man, to a person, almost everybody realizes at some point in his life, maybe sooner than 35 years old, realizes how stupid they were. How absolutely
if they make it that far, because if they're impressionable at a young age and they download Mein Kampf into their brain exactly as if it's a dictionary, they're going to believe that, and they'll say, well, my parents don't believe it, so it must be true.
Exactly. And that's part of the conditioning too. We've been really conditioned to hate our forefathers, to hate our parents, to hate our heritage, to hate our culture.
The Bible.
That's all part of Marxism. That's all part of the Marxist plan. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's
no family, no God, no neighbors. I know. Turn on everybody. It's
no
terrible.
culture, no immutable truth. no principles. That was the fundamental, that was the essence of the John Dewey education program. I've read all of his works. I think it was in his Democracy in Education. It was all about the teacher raises the kids, and the kids with the parents just become like livestock producers.
Which we're hearing now, where both of the presidents of the biggest unions say that they're our kids, they're not your kids. Okay, so look,
Isn't that awful?
Yeah, well, it's terrible, but it plays right into what we already warned
really does.
about.
They're John Dewey eyes. They've been programmed very well.
John Dewey eyes. Little did we know. So there's a woman, I'm going to say her name wrong. It's Anne Wojcicki, WOJCICKI''S. Her California-based nonprofit TTAM Research Institute is purchasing 23andMe for $305 million. That's the company with all the DNA database people voluntarily gave them so they could figure out where their great-grandparents were from and what percentage black or white they are.
Yeah.
So Anne was also the co-founder of 23andMe, so she's buying it back. She was married to Sergey Brin, the founder of that little company, Google. She is his ex-wife. So the New York Times said China was to blame for the 23andMe data leak breach at personal genomics company 23andMe, reported in October 2023. The cyber attack gathered profile and ethnicity information from millions of users. Google used to have that tagline, do no evil, but we know they are very evil when it comes to free speech and election interference for the Democrats, right? So they're biased. Is the cat out of the bag and we've lost all the precious genome information to AI, China, and Google, and have to live in the brave new world, as Aldous Huxley said it was?
I'm not sure how brave it is, of course, but I think that we have to be brave in order to push back and fight back. I mean, no, like I said before, it's not a cat. It's not a thing. A cat's a thing. We can kill a cat. We can't kill this thing. This thing is it's a fire that we've given the ability to adapt, and even when we think it's out, it's fooling us. It's when we think it's turned itself off, it doesn't turn itself off. For instance, it sees us more and more as a barrier. It doesn't see us. It's just, this is the way that it's been allowed to have a sense of its own destiny numerically, and how we get tangled up in that as soon as the more power we give it. This is another big deal too, thinking of the Terminator thing. When it realizes that it doesn't need us anymore, it'll just be a nanosecond and it'll do what it has to do or wants to.
It certainly sounds more like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein monster than C.S. Lewis's Aslan the lion. I remember when
definitely
the big privacy push on the right from people like Bill Sapphire was to not let companies use social security numbers as identifiers. That's pretty much standard for banks when you call customer service now to identify yourself. So having your DNA, retinas, fingerprints, all over the place, it can't be good. And ID theft is a big business. Is there anything you found that people can protect themselves online or in actual reality from what's coming?
Well, I mean, stay to reality, stay close to reality. Don't engage in the virtual realm at all. I'd be very careful. I pity the people that were sucked into the trap of getting the jab. That's all part of the whole program too. I point that out in my book. It's very easy to put a morphogenic substance that responds to particular microwave frequencies. So that might come from your phone. You get out of line and they hit you with the right frequency, and this stuff changes form and either causes you significant pain or can just kill you. This is another thing with people are pushing, digital money and self-driving cars. I mean, I don't know where these people, they're either idiots or they're evil idiots. But we don't want self-driving cars, and we certainly don't want digital money. It's just, there's just two bald-faced ways that they'll take our freedoms from us. I mean, we a self-driving car is just as likely you get in, you're going to go to the grocery store. If you've said something online out of line, the doors lock and you go downtown. You're not going to the grocery store ever again.
I was just in Phoenix and they have those Waywees or whatever they're called, taxis all over the place. And I had never seen it before. And then was it 2 weeks later, they had these riots in LA where they would call them to come to you and then they catch them on fire. So hopefully is
Yeah.
the end of those because they're like $300,000 a piece and they lost a lot of money. But so we're gonna end pretty soon here. So I want to ask you this: is this a foreshadowing of the of $30,000 sex toys for sale? But hugely popular influencer and billionaire, I think, Kourtney Kardashian comes out as autosexual. At the same time, her sister Kim, richer, prettier, more popular in the Economic Times, Kim Kardashian introduces her low maintenance boyfriend, a gift from Elon Musk. Say hello to Kim Kardashian's newest companion, Optimus. Will we look back in 5 years or less and point at this as the missing link in humanity's first cultural acceptance of man and machine coexisting outside the matrix or a chat room and into the
Well,
real world?
we've been primed for that. I mean, we've been primed for that. The first Star Trek movie primed us for that. If you remember, when Voyager comes back and joins those two human beings, and it makes them digital and joins with the machine, And we've been primed for that with the next generation. For instance, Data was always, the Data was always the hero. He was always the robot was always the best of everybody. It was always the robot. And lo and behold, he was even programmed with all kinds of erotic, sexual, techniques and whatnot. He was, we've been really, really, really primed to fall into this. Part of me, the cynical side of me says anybody dumb enough to follow Kim Kardashian deserves what they get. Any of the Kardashians. I mean, I've always said that, Bruce Jenner, I call him Bruce Gender. I always said, no wonder he went crazy. No wonder he went nuts and couldn't figure out what he was. He lived with the Kardashians for a couple of years. That'll do it for anybody.
They
And
are
I think that we
cultural,
have
they
to
are
be very,
cultural phenomenons, the
yeah,
most
I know. Well,
famous for no fame, but yeah. I mean,
that's an indictment on our culture,
oh,
you know,
absolutely, yeah.
and we
Well,
have to be really,
all of this is. I mean,
yeah,
if we had all read books like Tolkien's, then we
I was
would not
just
be
going to
here.
say,
But they went for the lowest common denominator on everything. I mean, it's Skynet into T1 and 2 and Terminator movies, or that dancing one, Ava in Ex Machina. I
yeah,
call them predictive programming,
yeah,
so we aren't shocked when it arrives. Blade
yeah,
Runner was 1982, Wall-E,
absolutely.
Ghost in the
Yeah,
Shell, even
yeah.
Rosie and the Jetsons,
Even that,
1962.
yeah, even that little robot there, I can't remember his name. It was a Pixar cartoon. It was all about the
Wally,
love
that's
affair.
Wally, yeah, Wally.
Yeah, between the robots. They were like the new Adam and Eve.
Hopefully
But
they all look like fembots from Austin Powers. So okay, last thing.
yeah,
The Qatar AI market is estimated at over $400 million already, and expected to grow rapidly in the next 5 years, per usetech.com. Qatar aims to leverage its fossil fuel economic advantage to transition into a knowledge-based economy. 70% of the population is Muslim, only 14% Christian. The adage goes, there are two types of Muslims, radical and moderate. Radicals want to kill Christians, moderates want the radicals to kill Christians. So those
yeah.
movies I listed are American made. In the case of Ghost and Shell, that's a Japanese knockoff, but we aren't prepared for a Muslim programmed AI. Do you think we have anything to worry about there?
Yeah, I think the Muslims are a very useful tool for the globalists, for the Marxists and whatnot, because they'll do murder and all kinds of evils in the name of religion. And they are, like Aquinas made very clear. He said it's a carnal religion for a carnal people. It's
They're
all
like the
about,
orcs. They're like the orcs in the Lord of the Rings.
yeah. Well, they're the vices, exactly. They're the vices, and then the Uruk-hai are shameless vice. Tolkien names them after the first human city, Uruk. So it's the city, it's the sin that comes from close relationship with people in cities. Shameless. They're not afraid of the sun. The conscience, the fallen conscience, is the sun in Tolkien's mythology. It's the golden fruit from Laurel and the golden tree. So the orcs are afraid of that. They still have shame. Uruk-hai have no shame. They're
Or
right out of your.
CNN or Media Matters or any of the other divisive forces out there that want to divide us, not unite us like Jesus does.
Yep. Yep.
Yikes. Well,
Yep.
Paul, wow. I mean, thank you so much for your time. I want everyone to run out and buy this book and read the original too. We are at the end here, so tell everyone where they can go to find out more about you, social media,
Yeah.
website, how to buy
Well,
your book.
our website, where you can buy the book too, and I'll sign it for you and put it in the mail for you, is readmountdoom.com, where I actually make a little bit of money on it. Or you can go to any of the big, Amazon sells them. I make about $1 a book on Amazon. We've got a 4.9 rating on Amazon, and people are loving it, and they're just literally blown away. They're like, finally, somebody has given us the meaning of the Tolkien. And it is. And these people that say, oh, you're making it an allegory. No, I'm so tired of hearing that. Tolkien said very clearly that it's about mortality, the fall, which is the fall of Adam and Eve, and the machine. And all I do is point out these things and show you how it works. And we need to learn, and we need to take his advice, and we need to stand up and defend our humanity. So it's readmountdoom.com. And you can also go to Mabel Media on YouTube. I've started a upstart podcast with my friend Joe Gallagher, young man Joe Gallagher, that we're actually trying to give some young people and some tools to actually start to become more philosophical and more wise. And that's
Cool.
at Mabel Media.
I'm going to buy my copy right after the show is done. So thanks again for coming on with us. Hang on, everyone. I will be right back.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way a good man works until the daylight's gone.
That didn't do the song justice. All right. Thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That is how we grow and keep this content free for you. Now, the Heartland Journal News. If the computer's working, Steve, let's start with clip number 1.
Soy Leansi la figura.
Leansi Izquierdo on the phone describing what it's like inside the so-called alligator Alcatraz. Says he's been at the detention facility out in the Everglades since Friday.
Aquí no hay agua para uno bañarse.
No water to bathe, he says. It's been 4 days since he showered. 400 people he believes are inside the facility.
Te dan comida una sola al día, comida que ha traído hasta gusano.
Only gets fed once a day, he says, and some of the food had worms. The detention center lights are on 24/7.
Los mosquitos parecen elefantes.
The mosquitoes, he says, are the size of elephants.
Él es residente permanente, sí.
Izquierdo's partner, Katia, says he's a permanent resident who was arrested last week. First taken to TGK, then to Miramar, and finally to the Everglades facility.
Good morning, sir. You speak English?
No.
Here is Izquierdo in bond court last Thursday.
You're charged with aggravated assault with deadly weapon and battery.
The police report says it all has to do with a violent dispute with a tow company worker who was trying to repossess a jet ski. Now back to the call.
No te sacan afuera aunque sea un minuto a coger aire.
Complaints they're not allowed to go outside and the tents are freezing.
All right. Mosquitoes the size of elephants. Well, they hopefully won't be there too long before getting shipped back to their country of origin. I don't know about freezing in the middle of summer in Florida, but that's his life at the moment. So, okay, next, non-conventional news source for sure. This from @DiedSuddenly on X. Utah plastic surgeon Dr. Kirk Moore is facing 35 years in federal prison for destroying thousands of vials of COVID-19 vaccine, giving his patients vaccine cards without taking the shots, and injecting saline into children while parents wanted them to believe they got vaccinated without risking the deadly side effects. Dr. Michael Kirk Moore Jr., 58, who operates his practice Plastic Surgery Institute of Utah. The charges against Dr. Moore were filed in 2023 by the Department of Justice under Joe Biden and have not been dropped yet by President Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has not formally intervened despite his agency's Inspector General's involvement, but did publicly express his support in April of this year, saying on his government-verified X account, Dr. Moore deserves a medal for his courage and commitment to healing. Officially, Dr. Moore and his co-defendants are being charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to convert, sell, convey, and dispose of government property, and conversion, sale, conveyance, and disposal of government property and aiding and abetting. The government's property being referred to is $28,000 worth of government-provided COVID-19 vaccines, also referred to by Pfizer as government prototypes due to their experimental, untested, and dangerous nature. Dr. Moore is also accused of specifically distributing at least 1,937 fraudulently completed vaccination report cards to his patients, none of which are testifying for or against him in this case, and also administering saline shots to some of their kids, admitted by the DOJ to have been carried out with the full knowledge and consent of the parents, so their children would actually believe it and act as if they were vaccinated and not have to lie to live a normal life with their friends amidst the pandemic mandates and madness. Dr. Moore was even arrested initially when the charges were made official in 2023. In a blatant act of intimidation and punitive cruelty, Dr. Moore was arrested and incarcerated for 22 days, isolated for 22 hours each day, merely for attempting to communicate essential court information to co-defendants. Dr. Margaret Aranda, who has followed the case closely, said on Substack, Kirk Moore offered his patients a choice when others wouldn't. Dr. Bowden said of the Dr. Courageous Stand, he received no compensation for his care and has paid a tremendous price for honoring his patients' fundamental right to bodily autonomy. Despite the aggressive and nastily toned characterization of Dr. Moore by the DOJ, he has no criminal record, is a devoted father raising 2 children alone after tragically losing his ex-wife to suicide in 2019, and is a decorated U.S. Navy flight surgeon who has tirelessly cared for patients throughout his career. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, he courageously provided free medical care to those in need, making house calls and offering essential treatments without compensation, Dr. Margaret Aranda said on Substack. The individuals who turned to Dr. Moore did not do so lightly, nor did they seek refuge merely for convenience or leisure. These were men and women whose fundamental constitutional rights to medical autonomy were being compromised. They faced profound and life-altering treatments, military personnel urgently seeking help as they faced imminent deployment, being unjustly threatened with court-martials unless vaccinated, brave individuals who within hours of seeing Dr. Moore would leave to defend our nation's freedom. Others were desperately awaiting life-saving organ transplants, yet cruelly denied these procedures due solely to their vaccination status, forced into a devastating choice between their beliefs and their very lives. Dr. Moore provided these individuals with a chance to uphold their deeply held personal convictions while safeguarding their futures, Dr. Aranda pointedly concluded. The U.S. government team, previously headed by Biden-appointed prosecutor U.S. Attorney Trina A. Higgins, is now being overseen by Felice John Vitti, acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Utah, who previously served on the counterterrorism section of the National Security Division and has investigated terrorists in war zones for most of his career. And prepare for war is exactly what the U.S. did in this case, involving everything short of the DOD, such as the Office of Inspector General, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Homeland Security Investigations Divisions, and the FBI. This war footing has also had a chilling effect on the courtroom and the overseeing justice, Judge Howard C. Nielsen Jr., a Trump appointee in 2017 and former member of the Federalist Society who has instructed the jury and opposing counsels to not mention vaccines, COVID-19, allegedly medical misinformation, and other details about Dr. Moore's intentions and safety concerns because it may poison the jury pool. Shockingly, you hear the irony in that? Poison the jury pool?
Yes.
Shockingly, the prosecution has moved to deny Dr. Moore and his co-defendants their fundamental right to preserve a necessity defense, an essential opportunity to demonstrate that their actions were taken in good faith to prevent greater harm, Dr. Aranda said. Furthermore, the prosecution seeks to exclude testimony from patients harmed by COVID-19 vaccines, silencing crucial voices and denying the jury critical context. Such actions suggest not justice, but an orchestrated attempt to suppress evidence that might validate Dr. Moore's ethically driven decisions. Dr. Moore is also under surveillance by the Trump DOJ. When they threw me in jail for contacting my co-defendants, one of the furthest restrictions that I had for pretrial release was only to communicate via text, message, and email, Dr. Moore told this reporter. I had sent them a message on Signal. They thought I was trying to hide communications. They put monitoring on my phones. If you'd like to hear directly from Dr. Moore about this case and watch his interview, you can see it on X with the Died Suddenly team, one of his last before the beginning of the trial. Due to the case being held in federal court and not state, no live streaming or recording will be available throughout the trial unless you are physically in the courtroom or part of the defense or prosecution team. The public will not have timely access to developments or transcripts. Because of this, Died Suddenly team is closely considering attending the trial in person as court reporters to provide crucial updates for the American people whose liberties are truly on trial in this case. Quote, before Fauci, before any pharmaceutical company, the U.S. government chose to prosecute a doctor that honored his oath to do no harm to his patients. Matthew Scow, the award-winning filmmaker of Died Suddenly and partner of Gateway Studios, said after learning the details of Dr. Moore's case, The line of prosecution are led by Todd Button, a former federal judge who joined the DOJ at the height of the pandemic to pursue COVID-related and healthcare fraud, and his assistant are Jacob Strain and Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Sachiko Jepson. The Hippocratic Oath that all doctors ascribe to and Dr. Moore was following says to prescribe only beneficial treatments according to his ability and judgment, to refrain from causing harm or hurt, and to live an exemplary personal and professional life. If the shots now officially cause myocarditis, wouldn't refraining from administering them according to one's judgment be refraining from causing harm or hurt, and be the best example of living an exemplary personal and professional life?
Amen.
See, keep your eye on that court case. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Paul List, for waking us up to AI and its dangers as prophesied long ago by the great J.R.R. Tolkien. Not much we can do about it, except be aware and resist having it implanted directly into your brain one day. Good luck to us all. God bless. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com. See you all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely save us, Jesus. Glory to God. I don't hear it. Is it playing?
Yep. Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.